Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast featuring Forbes contributor, entrepreneur, writer, and chief thinking officer at DRUMBEAT Productivity, Jonathan Denn, joining me. So, John, tell me about your book, DRUMBEAT Business Productivity Playbook, How to Beat Goals and Disorganization.
Well, thanks for asking. On one hand, it's a new take on time management. It's much more creative. It's a time management book for people who hate time management. It's got a metaphor of drumbeat or music, and the brain has 5 times more receptors for music than words. So it's a good way to take a new look at how you manage your day. And then the other part of the book is like a mini MBA for people who didn't really want to go into business, but hey, they find themselves there anyway. So it's a great way to have some new plays.
So, John, are you musical?
Well, I played drums in high school, but I don't play many drums now. But the metaphor I picked up then was any good task or any good effort done on a regular basis. And I realized over the years I kept on building on this metaphor of the drumbeat, and finally it crescendoed with the book.
How long did the book take you to write?
Well, I kind of used my own system to write it. So I outlined the book for 3 months, and I did that on my iPhone and a notes program. So instead of wasting time on social media, I'd spend time doing the outlining of the book right on my phone. Then I wrote for 3 months, and I did that by getting up at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock every morning, almost every day in the week. And I wrote for at least 90 minutes. So the words piled up pretty quick. And then I edited for 3 months and cleaned it up and got it into a good shape. And then I sent it out for edit for 3 months. So it took me a year.
Was that how you write all of your articles then as well? You kind of do it the same process?
Whenever I have an idea, I stop what I'm doing and I write it. So, I mean, obviously I don't walk out of meetings and stuff, but I get myself to a computer as fast as I can. And I find that when I write, when I have the muse, it's like fun and play. When I sit down and go, I have to write something now, that's work. So I like going with the muse.
You know, a lot of times I find that with music, if I listen to a song a couple of times, I tend to remember it a little bit better than if I'm reading something. Is that kind of where you're going with the whole concept of drumbeat?
Yeah, I'm hoping that people won't be able to get drumbeat out of their head.
Those are called earworms.
Well, look, here's the thing. You know, there's a lot of concepts in business that if you just remember the mental model or start a new habit and you start building on those things and you remember them, you'll start having fantastically better results in your business and in your career. The problem is with a lot of other business books is that, you know, they're kind of like public policy. It's boring. It's just hard to remember. So, but by making it fun, it is easy to remember. And if you can remember it, you'll do it.
Let's talk about a team. Let's say that our team, maybe our communication with our team isn't going very well. Will drumbeat be able to help us come up and form a new strategy in order to make our communication better?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting tips on that. One of the most interesting ones, I call it the Kettle Drum. So the Kettle Drum of questions. You know, someone knocks on the boss's door and it's like, hey, boss, what do you think about? And first of all, it's interrupting the boss, which really isn't a good idea. Open door policy is great as long as the door is open, but you got to keep the door closed to get your real work done, your solo work. But we'll come back to that later. So getting back to the Kettle Drum of questions, if the boss has 10 or 12 or 15 questions that you know he's going to ask or she's going to ask right after you knock on the door, well, I got a great idea. Maybe those things should be written down in advance and given to everybody when they get hired. Why keep it a secret? You know, so if you know how your boss thinks right off the bat, you'll start thinking better. If you start thinking better, you're going to make better decisions. If you make better decisions, you're going to get better outcomes. There really are only 4 different kinds of meetings, and this is lost on most people. So The first kind of meeting is called an information exchange. Bob, you know something I need to know, and I know something that you need to know. That's just an information exchange. That can be done much easier in email. Yeah, you can do it in person, but wow, that's taking up a lot of people's time. Important stuff in information exchanges, yeah, they should be done in person. So the second kind of meeting is converging. So you have enough information. It's time to make a decision. Okay, so we have all the information on the table. Let's come up with the answer. You know what? If it's 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other, or one solution slightly better than the other, don't waste any time on it. Just pick one and move on. So the third one's called divergence. This is the biggest mistake that most businesses make today. If you don't have enough information to make a decision, stop trying to make one. So, if you need a creative solution, you can't set a clock on that. Well, maybe you sort of can, but in essence, you need to take some time. You need to let it breathe. People need to think. Don't talk about numbers. If you're going to have a meeting, don't do it in a room where you talk about numbers. Go somewhere else. Go outside. Get different stimulation. Get the juices flowing outside the box. Be creative. And the last kind of meeting is purely social. And I don't mean social like a company picnic and here's the agenda for the picnic. I mean, just have fun, just talk. Some of the best ideas will come out of a staff or a team lunch where there is no agenda. Make sure accounting sits with sales and marketing sits with engineering. I mean, mix it up, get some different ideas going. And, an adult beverage or two wouldn't hurt.
Never. That never hurts. Honestly, with the friends of mine that I have that have real jobs that actually, punch a clock and deal with bosses is a lot more so than what I did in my radio career. It seems like a lot of those people have meetings all the time. I don't know how the hell work gets done with all the meetings that people have.
Yeah, you know what? And that's a really huge mistake. So the DRUMBEAT day, it's a default day. So whenever you can, it's 2 3-hour sets. And the 3-hour sets are comprised of a 90-minute solo session for getting your work done. Turn off your email. Do not disturb on your phone. Close your door. Don't surf. Just work on the project that you need to work on. After the 90-minute session, it's followed by 1-hour jam session. And what I mean by a jam session is that's your face-to-face meetings, that's a phone call, that's complex emails, but communicating with others. And then you finish up the 3-hour set with a 30-minute rapid task completion. I call them finales. So anything you can get done in 30 minutes. It can be by yourself or with other people. But if you look at your day that way and not in hours, but in sets, you got one of those sets before lunch and one after lunch for most people. And that leaves you 2 hours of the day for improv. And you can repeat any of those that you want, or you can just walk around with a yes and attitude. Yes and is the secret to improv in theater, where you're being creative and you're not turning off the creative process by saying no but. So it's a different attitude. It's a difference between a closed-minded attitude and an open-minded attitude. So if you use that formula, you don't over-meet all day, right? You have to make, when you get the 1-hour meeting in the morning, 1-hour meeting in the afternoon, make them count and don't do meetings unless you have to. So that's one of the ways you can stop the meeting all day thing. The other one that's a really good tip too is for that quiet time. Maybe 90 minutes won't work in your office or wherever you're at, but maybe an hour would. Well, an hour is good, an hour of uninterrupted time. But if everybody takes the same hour, wow. Okay, that way no one's knocking on anyone's door. That doesn't work in every office, but wow, if you can pull it off, it's fantastic.
You had mentioned keeping the door closed earlier and said we'd get back to that. Can we circle back to keeping the door closed now?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. The concept of an open door policy is good. What that means is if you need to talk with me, I'm happy to talk with you. That's the meaning of an open door policy. The problem is that people took it too literally And people don't close their doors anymore. Or what's even worse is these open office spaces. I mean, it works for some businesses, but generally speaking, if the door is open and someone interrupts you, we now know from neuroscience that you get a time penalty. The time penalty, I've seen research anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes. What that means is you're deep in thought, you're working on something, you were getting to a good place, you were about to figure something out, you were about to have a breakthrough, and knock, knock, knock. And someone asks you a stupid question, and you start running through your head like, that was a stupid question. Why can't they answer that for themselves? They've asked me that 3 times. So by the time you end that exchange, you think to yourself, where was I? And it'll take you 2 to 20 minutes to get back to that delicious place that you were just at, or that you were about to make the breakthrough. This might have happened to you, in fact. I bet it has. So you're working on something, and all of a sudden it starts to look a little familiar. It's like, wow, that's weird. I just had a deja vu. And you work on it for a couple more minutes, and wait a minute, something's weird here. And then all of a sudden you realize that you sat down and did this work before, and you got interrupted, and you didn't finish, and now you just did it all again and wasted all that time. Did it ever happen to you?
It happens to me all the time. So is that how we go back and beat the goals and start working on our disorganization, by focusing in on these different jam sessions?
Yeah, you got it. So, the other day, I was talking about disorganization. Somebody asked, what's your definition of disorganization? And I said, it's not using the 2 sets. If you think of your day, and this is when I'm going to close my door, and this is the big project I'm working on tomorrow, and this is who I'm going to talk to tomorrow, and this is why I'm going to talk to them, and here are those little tasks that I got to get done because I got to check them off, get them off my list. If you put those all your tasks in those 3 drums, you won't be disorganized.
I am a very unorganized. It's funny. I've been married to my wife for 28 years, and my wife is very meticulous. Everything's got a place. Every place has a reason. Every reason has order. I, on the other hand, I have an office that she closes the door to because she doesn't want to look in here.
You have a closed door policy.
Yeah, and I know where everything is. And I know where everything is in my office. I know that right there is this, and over here is that. And if you're looking for that, it's over in that pile, right? So, is there such a thing as being a disorganized, organized person?
Yes, actually, that's true. So I was talking to one of my clients once, and he was going to redesign his office, and he was telling me what he was going to do. I said, let me make a suggestion, because this guy was an engineer, but he was very creative. So I said, look, why don't you have 2 desks? And one of them is like where you sit down and talk to people and keep that clean, neat, organized, in order. But at your other desk, like a stand-up desk, where you tinker and you create all your inventions, have that look like a bomb went off. Right? So colors, tools, knickknacks, funny things to look at. It doesn't matter. Make it as crazy as you want. In the book, I call it an awful office. So, so the idea is that you want to stimulate creativity in a messy space, and you want to do tasks that are organized for your administration. So if you physically get up and actually move to those spaces, and again, you'll pick up a lot of productivity.
John, what's your best productivity tip?
Well, it's funny you asked. In my book, I've got my top 12, and the number 1 is, what should I be doing right now? What should I be doing right now? So I first asked myself that question. I was in the hotel business early in my career, and I was assistant hotel manager, and I'm running the night shift, pretty much by myself. And man, I was just crazy busy, and I couldn't keep the tasks organized in my head. And finally, one day I was walking down one of the corridors, and I said, what should I be doing right now? And I never stopped asking myself that question. And invariably, it's something else. So, if you
story of my life.
Well, okay. and then so after a while, right, what happens is you start actually doing what you should be doing right now first. Now, notice when I put inflection on be and do, being, what should I be doing, be and do.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of goes back to your wife and you. So she's kind of doing by keeping everything organized, and you're kind of being by having stuff kind of disorganized. So you're kind of in a diffuse creative space. She's in a more analytical, get it done space. So one of the things I find too is that many people spend too much time in the one they are most comfortable with. So if you like order, you have a tendency to stay maybe a little too organized. And if you like being creative, you have a tendency to maybe not be enough analytical. So it's good to look at your day and those different, the different beats of creativity and being administratively organized.
All right, John, I got to ask this. You said the be and the do. Is the D the drum and the do, or the do, the beat, the drum, and the B is the beat? So together you got the drum beat?
Wow. I hadn't even thought of that one. I just think you tortured my metaphor more than I did.
Does that work though, right?
That's good. I like it. It does. It does work.
So
doobie doobie doo.
on your About Us page on your website, it says that it says that you are the Chief Thinking Officer at DRUMBEAT Productivity. What does that mean? What does the Chief Thinking Officer do?
Well, here's the thing. When you hire on a new team member, I don't think there's probably one business in the entire country that then hands them the thinking manual. And what do I mean by a thinking manual? This is how we think around here. What do you mean think? Well, here's how we do our creative tasks. Here's how we do our administrative tasks. And here's how we have our meetings. And these are the questions that your boss wants you to think about before knocking on the door. And here's a model for you to figure out how you should plan out your day and plan out your projects. I don't think anybody does that. So I do.
Have you written more books than just the DRUMBEAT book?
I wrote a pretty dandy one-act play once that won a bunch of awards, but I haven't written any other. My wife and I did a couple travel guides about 15, 20 years ago, but I don't have any other books out at the moment besides the DRUMBEAT Business Productivity Playbook.
But you also write for Forbes then also? How'd you get to be a writer?
Well, I submitted a couple articles or I submitted a lot of articles and finally they got accepted. So, yeah, I have to just keep on trying. The more tenacious you are, the more lucky you are. So.
Yeah, the harder you work, the luckier you are.
Yes, that's right. That's
right. I like to ask a lot of my guests about failure. Explain a failure you've had and how you've overcome it. Well,
that's a really wonderful question. Going back to that knocking on the office door thing that we did earlier, if you send people away to make their own decisions, that way they'll fail occasionally. And when they do, you as the boss have invested in their learning. And that can be painful, but that's how people grow and get better. One of the biggest mistakes I made, I don't know, I had a nightclub once in one of my hotels, and I thought having dancing servers, singing and dancing servers would be a really cool idea. Not so much. So that was a failure, that one. So, but then I learned not to do that again. And one of the next nightclubs we redid was a smashing success. And I must have learned from the first one, right?
Well, I think that shows that you're successful and that you think and that you learn from your mistakes. And it's funny. I've got 4 children, and 2 of my kids are entrepreneurs. And I try to tell them to remember their mistakes, because if they make them again, then it's their own fault,
Yes, that's actually right. It sounded like asking a dumb. There are no dumb questions except if you ask the same question again a second time, then it's dumb. Successful people make about the same number of good decisions as people who are not so successful. They just make a whole lot more decisions. Babe Ruth struck out as much, he was the number one strikeout king as well as the number one home run king in his day.
You've got to break a few eggs to make some good omelets. I guess that's what that's kind of what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, and I love eggs too.
Yeah, me too. I like omelets with everything in there. How do you how do you slow yourself down? Because oftentimes we get stuck up in we've got this to do, we've got that coming up that we need to have that done by tomorrow, and that's next thing. The other project needs to be done by the day after tomorrow, and I want this right now. How do you slow some of those things down and slow your mind down so that way you can focus in on the one thing that needs to be done right now before you jump ahead to the thing that's due tomorrow or the thing that's not due till next week?
Yeah, it starts with planning your week in advance, and I like to recommend Thursday afternoon. So Thursday afternoon, you can do it maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I suppose some people need a whole hour or a 90-minute session. But look, if you pace yourself on what it is that you got to get done next week, you realize in those 2 sets a day, you got 10 sets a week. So try not to overschedule the 10 sets. So and then start saying no to people when they come with you with things that are really optional or not that important. Explain to them that I understand why this is important to you. Give them a quick explanation of what your week looks like next week and why you're trying to achieve that. And then say, look, I got to tell you, I just don't have time to put it in my schedule for next week. Now, if it's your boss, you have to have a negotiation. If it's a coworker, maybe they have to understand, or you need to negotiate to help them later at some other time, or figure something out between the two of you. Well, and then if you do the same thing every night, or maybe it's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the next day. What am I going to get done tomorrow and the next day? Maybe you have to change gears. Maybe you have to bang a different drum. That's fine. I'm not very rigid with the system. You need to do some improv. I like the jazz metaphor. Jazz musicians do a lot of improvisation, right? And it sounds fantastic. And you get better with improv as you practice on it. So, and then here's one last tip. I'd say that if you can work a little bit of silence, like what happens between the drum beats, there's silence, right? So, meditation is fantastic. If you can get, a 10-minute, I prefer 20-minute meditation. It doesn't have to be sitting in a chair. You can do moving meditation, yoga, qigong, walking, go for a long walk for 20 minutes, get out in nature. You'll probably find that you're going to start sleeping better. Your mind will be clearer. You won't be so stressed. A lot of times too, you can go for a 5-minute walk at the end of every hour. There's been a recent study done. People who took a 5-minute walk every hour were no less productive than people who stayed at their desk the whole hour. The difference is that the people who went for a walk for 5 minutes every hour were way happier. Well, that's kind of a nice way to live your life, being happier, more rested, relaxed, clearer thinking. So it's counterintuitive, actually. There are other studies that have been done that say that taking a nap during the day actually increases productivity. But wow, you don't see people napping in America at work, do you? Well,
well, that's when the doors close, John.
Yeah, doors closed and the drapes drawn. Yeah, that's right.
When the doors close, don't knock. And if you hear me snoring, it's me just breathing very deeply. So what did you?
My meditation thing.
Exactly. Instead of going, I'm going. Yeah. So what's your takeaway from the book when you were writing it? What did you learn?
Oh, that's really interesting. No one's ever asked me that before. I think that the one that really jumped out at me that I really hadn't even thought of until I was actually like typing was that Kettle Drum question. I mean, when you think about it, what is the deal if a boss doesn't share their mental models, the questions they always ask in advance with the people that report to them? What's up with that? I mean, it's like I'm bogarting my knowledge so that you won't be successful. I mean, that's like weird. I mean, if there's, if you got 10 or 20 or 15 or 5 questions that you always ask people, write them down and share them. Man, when I stumbled across that one while I was writing the book, I went, wow. And then actually something came up. I was reading Ray Dalio's book recently, Principles, and he sort of gets to the same place. That's what he calls them, principles.
Right.
So here's how we do things here. I mean, that's the closest I've seen to the drum beat. It's just that my system's a whole lot more fun than Ray's.
John, what's the best purchase you've ever made?
Oh, cool question. I think I can give you an answer too. So this guy invented this earthing pad. So he realized that, we used to walk around in our bare feet out on the grass, the sand. And so the earth is one giant negative electron. And free radicals in our body that causes disease and inflammation are positive electrons. So when modern society came up with this genius idea of walking around with rubber-soled shoes, we disconnected ourselves from the earth. And now we have all sorts of these inflammatory problems in our society that other societies who walk on the earth actually don't have as much of. So it's like epidemiological. And so here's the thing. So this guy invented it where you can just plug it into the ground, by your outlet, by your chair, and you can sleep on sheets that are plugged in, or you can have a mat on your arm or on your feet. And so what happens is that you're actually quenching all those free radicals in your body. So I've been doing this for, 5-6 years. And I mean, I just feel fantastic. In fact, my sleep got so much better when I started sleeping on an earthing half sheet. Mm-hmm. It's astounding. In fact, I carry a portable one with me when I travel on the road. So that's the best thing I ever bought.
Let me ask you this. You said that you were in the hospitality business, and everybody listening has traveled. What's the biggest mistake that most hotels and most people that are in the hospitality business make?
Well, the industry's gotten a lot better over the past, since there was the Great Recession, since '08. So a lot of the stupid stuff hotels used to do is kind of gone away. I mean, they used to have terrible bedding. Now the bedding's fantastic. They used to make you drink water out of the tap, and at least now they're trying to find ways to let you have water that doesn't necessarily have chlorine in it. They got hair dryers in the rooms. I mean, the hotel industry's really come a long way. On every trip I've been on this year, I've actually been pleasantly surprised almost everywhere I've stayed. I actually have to say that I think the hotel industry's done a pretty good job over the past decade. Wow, it wasn't so great before then.
Maybe you getting out was the what it needed.
Yeah, that's what they needed me to leave. Yeah.
Jonathan Denn is my guest. The book is called DRUMBEAT Business Productivity Playbook: How to Beat Goals and Disorganization. What 3 takeaways would you like people to have after reading your book?
Well, the first one is to look at your day in sets and sessions, not boring meetings and hour after hour of getting nothing done. So that's the first one. The second one is that you need to share how you think about the work with your team so that they know in advance how to work through challenges and opportunities by themselves. And so number 3 is that when you're planning out your day or your week, there are 4 symbols to crash. And the first crash of the symbol is what you want to get done by when. The second crash of the symbol, which is probably even more important, is what's the first step to get there? And then don't worry so much about how, the third symbol, because you'll figure out how to do it as long as you get started. And then the fourth one is the reward you'll give yourself when you succeed. Give yourself a little goober, something to look forward to, a workout, a nice meal, taking some extra time off, cutting out early. But if you look at those things you want to do strategically, then you'll be much better at planning out your days and your weeks.
All right, and before I ask the last question, I need a drum roll. How do we find your book, John?
The DRUMBEAT Business Productivity Playbook is available on Amazon, Audible, iTunes. There's on my website, drumbeatproductivity.com. There's a free 2-page handout which will get you started on your sets and sessions. It's called Double Your Downtime. I do phone consulting. I work with 50 different industries with my private advisory boards and my coaching, so I'm pretty well versed in what's going on in business today. A solution in one industry may very well work in another, which is kind of shocking. And a lot of business today is actually pretty similar, no matter if you're in manufacturing or in service. I mean, everybody understands their own product or service better than I do, but when it comes to the running of the business, I kind of see what's working out there and what isn't working out there. So usually we can get to really great outcomes really fast.
The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.